if this decides to. All right, we're recording. So I have another guest with me today. Thanks so much for being on. Say hello.
Hi, great to be here with you.
All right. I really appreciate you being here and telling your story and your experience about how the whole hypnotherapy came in with how the experience was for you. So just to get started here, would you mind just sharing what you came to me for? What was the problem you came to me for?
Yeah, so I was struggling with pornography use, had been struggling for quite a while, and had exhausted my known resources to solve the problem with little success, and so that is why I reached out to Nelson.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't mind sharing some of the details, we don't want this to be too probing and intimate, but when were you first exposed and how?
Um, to my recollection, I was exposed around the age of 13 or 14, just scrolling social media accounts.
Okay, social media. So, and you're in your 20s now, right?
Yep, I'm just turned 24.
So how long had you been struggling with it? And were there periods in your life where you felt like you didn't struggle with it?
Yeah, so I struggled with it, I guess, from we could say 14 till halfway through 23 and a half, but I did take a 2 year break when I went on my mission. I did not struggle with it at all as a missionary. I would probably say because I didn't really have the opportunity to. I didn't have any smart devices or access to anything that I mean besides walking on the streets, but
Sure, sure. And
that's yeah. So nine years, give or take 2 years.
okay. And during that 9 years, what was the pornography causing as a problem in your life? What were you noticing that you're like, oh man, this porn's messing with me?
For sure through the later I'd say through the second half of high school into my first couple years here in college, just general confidence in relationships, whether that be with my parents, relationship with God, relationships with um, females, and trying to dating, that was definitely affected.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned earlier that you had exhausted your resources. What had you tried to fix the pornography habit?
Um, I had actually never, so I'd say I did everything from setting filters on my phone, setting time limits, keeping technological devices outside of my room. Um, what else? The typical of reading my scriptures more and listening to better music and I don't know, trying to watch better movies and just all the things that trying to fortify myself against the temptation, I guess.
Sure. So what do you feel like was triggering you? When were you getting tempted the most?
I think your typical whenever I was stressed out or bored, being idle, um, whenever I had difficult situations with dating, funny like when I was sick or just weak, those are typical moments that I would turn to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you first came across what I was claiming, what I was offering as far as the therapy and hypnotherapy and saying, hey, we can fix this really quickly. It's not a hard thing to fix, maybe even in one session. What were the thoughts that were going through your mind? Were you believing that? Were you hesitant? Were you reluctant to reach out to me? What were your thoughts?
Um, Definitely a little bit reluctant. I feel like I've developed somewhat of a an attitude of don't trust things that are too good to be true. And I felt like I had battled with with this problem for so long, and I felt like it was such a complex problem that when you were phrasing it the way you were phrasing it, it was somewhat hard to believe. But at the same time, I'd say that was minor, and more so, I was hopeful, given the fact that it had not been too long before that moment that I found you that I had opened myself up to the idea of getting help, professional help, and like that was something that I was a little bit more open to when I did come across your
Yeah.
video, I guess. And so when I did, I was intrigued because through watching your video, it made sense to me the way that you described the problem itself. It just like I didn't see why it couldn't be fixed either. So I was
Yeah.
intrigued to learn more, I guess you could say.
What about the idea of hypnosis? Because professional talk therapy and an expert traditional talk therapist isn't going to be using hypnosis. So when you heard hypnosis, what thoughts did you have about that? Because and I'd like my hearers here to understand you are in church leadership and a bishopric right now, and a lot of times members of the church have a lot of resistance to this because it's actually in the church handbook, right? Be careful about entertainment hypnosis and make sure you're consulting with a medical provider about doing this. So there is a statement in there that sometimes gives people pause, like, oh, maybe this is some scary mind control thing. But what were your thoughts about the actual hypnosis side of it?
That's a great question. I I was, you could say, a little bit hesitant. Um, and so I did reach out to a medical professional who happened to be my father, and he also happened to be a YSA bishop at that time. And so I felt like he could give me a pretty good perspective from both sides of it, given his responsibilities in the church as well as in the medical field. And his response was pretty simple of that he also didn't know a whole lot about it, but he also didn't feel like it was anything to be afraid of, and that he thought it was definitely worth looking into and learning more about as well. So that was kind of the mindset I went into it with. And I, of course, I looked it up. Like I read that same thing that you mentioned, to consult a professional, to definitely not jump right into it, to think about it, and I would say I'm a prayerful individual, and I definitely never felt that it was something to avoid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the irony is, like, even talking to your dad, most medical professionals, doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists know nothing about hypnosis. I mean, they kind of give lip service to it, like, oh yeah, it's a thing. They may have been taught a little bit about it, but they don't use it, at least not as a primary source of therapy or preventive type therapy in anything that they do. Because I work with so many of them, it's like handbook says go talk to them, but they don't know anything about it. So it kind of makes it hard for people to want to figure it out and come in. But so when you'd done all this research in a totally ideal world, what were you shooting for? What was your goal? What were you hoping to get out of working with me?
Um, Figure out my problem, to quit looking at pornography, to quit feeling the need to gain more self control over my thoughts and behavior. I don't know. I was looking for and believed in complete healing. I I've never, I guess, got along with the people in my life who are of the belief that this is something to be struggled with for the rest of your life. It's never quite sat well with me in my brain, and so I was looking for something that kind of went along the lines of ultimate healing and finally overcoming something that has been a struggle for you could say, a majority of my life.
Yeah. So did you get the result you were hoping for?
Absolutely,
Awesome.
I
And
did.
go ahead.
No, I guess you can ask your question. Maybe
I
more
was
directed.
just going to say, I mean, we only did the one actual hypnotherapy session, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep, correct. And it's been almost 6 months since then, and I've tried my best to be as proactive about the um, affirmations and different mind techniques that you taught me, but I've had a 180 experience with temptation and whatnot since then. I've I've yet to even want to look at pornography or even felt a pull to in the last 6 months, which before meeting with you, I couldn't go 6 days without that. So it's been pretty exciting.
That is so exciting. It's such a huge win. I am so happy for you. And people hear this and they're like, ah, but that's not typical results. Half of my clients come in and they're getting that result. They feel like the temptation is basically gone. If they're willing, you get out of it what you put into it. If you come in and do the therapy and you're 100% all in and you do the simple skills and tools like little affirmations, people are used to affirmations and everyone tells you to do affirmations. But we teach it a little bit different in context of when we do the hypnosis, and those two things together make it so that you can keep permanent results. So I'm really glad that you've had that. So when you came in, I have people come in, they sit right here in this chair like you did. And would you say, well, would you mind sharing your experience when you came in, maybe like from beginning to end, did it match what you were expecting? Was there anything surprising about what we did? What did you learn that maybe was the issue and the answer for you? What was your experience with the whole hypnosis thing?
I guess all of it was a little bit, you could say, surprising, just because I had little expectation of what it was going to be like. So maybe it wasn't surprising because I didn't have any expectation. But um, I don't know. It was an environment that was conducive to trust, and I knew that you had my best interest in mind. As far as the hypnotherapy went, it was quite interesting because I was very cognizant of what was being said and what was going on, and I remember that conversation. But it was interesting of where we were able to get, and I guess what I learned is that my mind had been programmed to believe that pornography was, like, in my subconscious, believe that pornography was all right, even though maybe my conscious mind was aware that it was something that I should be working on. My subconscious mind was had been programmed from years past that was a method that was acceptable, and maybe not even acceptable. It was just a method to cope. Um, and through hypnotherapy, we were able to go back, forgive my past self who had initially made that mistake, and then retrain my mind to think of it in a different light, which has been super helpful, to think of it that way, and super effective for me. It makes a lot of sense. I think the two things I'm super grateful for are the two calls, I guess one call and one meeting I had with you before the hypnotherapy, that you went in depth and explained the mind and what was going on, and what the hypnotherapy was actually doing. Maybe not what the hypnotherapy process was, because you can't really explain that without doing it, I guess. Um, but explaining what the process was and what it was doing was very helpful.
Yeah. So with you going down into trance, you figured that stuff out. But what was the trance feeling like? Because some people think that it's like I'm controlling you and I'm telling you what to do, I'm telling you what to believe. And everyone kind of experiences it a little bit differently, but how did you experience that sensation of being in trance? What was that like for you?
Yeah. Hard to put into words, but I think when I've explained it to my friends since then, or to my parents, it's just like I was very aware. Like I said, I remember that conversation. I remember being in trance, and I just remember it being more of just a focus state. Of I was hyper focused on what was going, like, on the present, and there wasn't any room for any sort of distraction. And so that, I guess that's probably the best way that I could put into words what the trance state was like.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people hesitate because they don't understand that. In fact, they'll say, oh, well, what if we don't believe the same? What if you have different spiritual or religious beliefs than I do? I don't want you to be trying to convert me to your way of thinking about pornography. I don't want you to be converting me to your like spiritual religious beliefs if we're not on the same page and I'm letting you into my mind. What would you say to that?
I would say that's a naive and erroneous thought because the person hasn't had any experience. Like we've mentioned a couple of times here, it's a new experience for a lot of people. And the reason why the handbook says consult a medical professional and see what it is because they don't know. Like I'd say that it would be pretty safe to say that the church leaders and those who wrote the handbook didn't give a stance on it because they didn't know, and they trust the medical professionals to and those who have studied it to know like what the consequences of it are. But having experienced it, it's in no way, shape, or form are you under any sort of control. I felt that I could walk out of that room any moment I wanted to, while in a trance state. Like I could choose to sit there or walk out. I didn't feel any loss of capability.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up earlier, that you remembered everything, even up until today, you remember that conversation, because some people think that they're actually unconscious and they come out and they have some sort of amnesia, like in these stage performance type things, in Hollywood, movies and whatnot, like they can do that. But um, if people can do that with hypnosis, I've done almost 3,000 sessions now and 5 years of doing this full time. I don't know how to do that. I don't think it's a thing. Um, but so what did you notice afterwards, after the session, maybe right after the session or the days following the session? What did you notice?
Um, sorry. Um, just heightened. I think the biggest thing, I guess, funny. I guess I can tell this story that the 7 days following, I feel like I ran into very explicit, um, what's the word, triggers that used to push me towards pornography, like a snap of a finger, like no second thought, like I'd automatically go towards it. I was sick right after that. Um, a girl I was going out with dumped me. I made a very costly mistake, had to buy a new computer that was completely my fault. And like a couple other things happened in those 7 days span. And I just remember every time that happened, like being retrospective and being like, wow, I didn't even think to turn towards pornography. And like in my mind, I'd even think about it and be like, why is that not a thought anymore? Like I could go back and think about it and be like, that's what would have happened, but now like I don't even have that thought anymore. So that's what it was like right after, right after I walked out that door. It was
Yeah.
effective, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you texting me and telling me all that. I've had every trigger possible thrown at me and haven't slipped up. So yeah. And in the last 6 months, I think you've said it hasn't been much of a fight or a struggle for you, but have you noticed any byproducts like the pornography? Okay, you're not looking at that, but have you noticed any other things in your life that have also cleared up or you've gained freedom in because you no longer have that mental energy looking for pornography?
Um, I think the biggest one is I have a girlfriend now. We're on the verge of like getting engaged and we'll be married probably by the end of the summer.
Holy cow, congrats.
And yeah, thanks. It's crazy because and we actually like I had the conversation with her about this exact thing this last Sunday. Put it all on the table, brought it up, like let her know what had been going on, what happened, what's going on now, and it was just relieving to be able to tell her to her face that it's not a problem, that it had been a problem in my life, but it's not no longer a problem. That I've done the work and I'm continuing to do the work to keep it not a problem, right? Um, so just confidence in that, just relief and like I don't know. I feel like I'm being 100% transparent with those around me of who I am and what I'm doing because in the before definitely felt like a hypocrite of living a life that people thought I was doing everything right with my life when I knew behind closed doors I wasn't. And
Yeah.
so just that confidence is strengthening, the difference maker for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that I'm glad you brought that up. And I know we're kind of running out of time here, but I just want to bring up, I just saw another porn coach, guru, expert, specialist, whatever you want to call him, that does a lot of social media work and giving people advice on how to quit a porn problem. And today I saw them saying uh, that you're worthy even if you have a porn problem. You're good enough even if you have a porn problem. Like it, this is not a reflection on who you are and your worth and whether you're good enough. And I get that people really want to believe that, and it sounds nice. And I don't want to be hard on people and be like, hey, you're not worth it and you're not good enough and you're not a human being if you have a porn problem. But the reality is that's not what people want to hear. They want to get over the problem so that they can feel worthy again. And they want to not have the porn problem so that they can feel like they're good enough in overcoming it. So they're not feeling weak. And the reality is none of us are really good enough anyway, right? Isn't that the point of coming down here, recognizing we're not good enough unless we connect with Christ and together we're good enough, right? It's like, you're not good enough, but that's okay if you connect with that power that can make it, make you stronger and make you whole and make you perfect, so to speak. Because the reality is 6 months ago, you talking to the girlfriend, uh, you would have felt unworthy. Doesn't matter how much you would have tried to accept yourself in talking to somebody face to face to tell them you got this problem. It makes you feel less than, it makes you feel unworthy because you know it's not your moral standards, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Did you have thoughts?
Just probably closing thoughts for me, but I guess one thing that I love the most about hypnotherapy was that it's like it's the mind, it's natural. You're not taking any medication or any pills that could be altering anything in your body. And it would be foolish to think that this was, I don't know. I don't know. For like I was praying for a year for deliverance from this specific problem, and the fact that it came through this, like that's no that's no coincidence. Like God is not limited in his means of, and not saying that everyone has to go through this to overcome it, but it is certainly an avenue that is available to people that should be looked into if that's a real desire of their hearts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on. Are there any last pieces of advice, what that you'd give maybe to somebody who's hesitating to try the hypnotherapy, or last parting words of wisdom from you as someone who's experienced it that you'd like to share?
Um, Obviously, like whoever this is shown to, I don't know, but my friends could tell you this, that I've been preaching it to them because it's the best decision that I've ever made, and I, there's nothing to lose. There's nothing to lose. If it's a problem and you want to overcome it, then make it a priority and find the solutions that work.
Yeah,
Truly.
awesome. Well, thanks again for being on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Nelson.
Yep.